couple of weeks ago, I made the determination to do this, and I intended to really practice every day between then and now. And about every other day was kind of a hit and miss time. Just life is always busy, and I wasn't able to do so. So I'm not going to do what I originally planned to do, which was like do a whole song for you with John accompanying me. That we just never could get that one quite going. But I'm going to do something else. I'm going to really talk about a talent that God gave me that is not a talent for trumpet playing. It's actually just a musical talent that He gave. Some of you may have it. Some of you may wish you had it. But it's the ability to play by ear. If you understand what I mean, most of what I've played throughout my lifetime has been by ear. I can read music eventually. But I remember when I had my first music lessons when I was 5 years old. My sister took and played accordion, and she played piano, and I would listen to her on the piano, and I'd sit down at the piano and try to plunk out a few notes on the piano. I could actually make it sound like whatever song I was trying to do. Couldn't read music, but at the age of 5, I began accordion lessons. Had a little red borrowed accordion from my teacher. And I went in for accordion lessons, and she'd put a sheet of music in front of me and say, now, I want you to learn to play this. And I said, okay. And I said, would you do me a favor? Would you play it one time just so I kind of know how it sounds? And she'd say, sure. And she'd play it, and then I'd play it after her, fairly convincingly. It didn't take long, she caught me. She caught on, she said, you're not reading the music, are you? I said, no, ma'am. You just heard, you're playing by ear. And I said, that's right. She says, no, I'm not going to play it for you anymore because I want you to learn how to read the music. Now, my friend Kent Yarborough, y'all have heard me talk about him a few times over the years. Kent told me about a piano player that played by ear. And I don't know if Kent was kidding sometimes or if he really heard somebody, but he said the guy had an artificial ear. And he'd take that artificial ear and bang the keys on the piano and play out of tune. So he played by ear. Right. So, I'm not talking about doing this with a trumpet here, but I'm talking about that you can just hear in your own head certain things and duplicate that in sound. Now, the first thing you need to do when you play a horn is kind of warm it up. And to start with, it doesn't even really need to sound like a real note. It's just kind of a very light buzz. Sounds something like this. Doesn't that impress you? All you do is just getting your lips vibrating. And if I really did that right, you'd get bored listening to it, so I'm not going to spend a long time doing that. But eventually it becomes a note. Now, here's what I want to do. This is an audience participation, help me out thing. I have no idea. Nobody's planned it out there. Have no idea. And we're going to have to kind of just go with some hymn stuff because I remember the tunes on some of those. But somebody name a hymn in just a second, and when you do, I'll try to play it. Now, here again, don't forget you told your neighbor you're not going to be too impressed. But I'll play it by ear because, as you see, this is not music. It's just my notes. I don't have any music with me, but you'll see how it works. So what's a hymn that somebody can name? The Rugged Cross? Oh, Rugged Cross? You want? You get one now. Which one you want? What's that? Okay. Thank you for giving that a hand as in not warmed up. I wasn't impressed, but I hope you. What's another one? And the saints go marching in. right, one more. Y'all not picking them too hard, so I appreciate that. What's another one? Let's see. Fly to the bumblebee. I can make a sad attempt at it. All right, one more, a little less complicated. What? Okay. Love you, Miss Martha. That's a good song. You heard him say, that's all, folks? Literally, because I haven't been practicing, that's all you would even pretend to want to hear right now. But I want to talk to you about developing your gifts. And we'll just use this as an illustration. Your talent is God's gift to you. Now, my talent, God didn't give me trumpet playing as a gift. That had to be developed. He gave me the ability to play by ear and eventually develop the ability to read some music. But that was God's gift to me. Whatever I've done with it since then has been my gift back to Him, to take it and develop it. And obviously, I've been concentrating on a lot of the things in life and hadn't been concentrating on trumpet playing now. My wife would prefer I kind of get back with it, and a few of you that knew when I really could play. So I'm not going to say I promise, but I'll say I'll do my best in that area to get my lip back. It's kind of like trying to run a marathon. You hadn't even walked in a while. You know, it takes a little bit to develop that. But what you do with your gift is your gift back to God. He gave you whatever that was. If you develop it, that's the way that God can use you. Now, some of you may be good. You may not be a musician. You may not have music in you. You may not have an ear for music, but maybe you're the world's best cookie maker. God can use your cookie making to bless other people. You may say, oh, that's not all that big a gift. Well, it is to somebody who loves cookies. And as a result, you can have a big impact on somebody's life just by making a few cookies for them or something like that. I want to give you this morning 3 obstacles to developing your gifting or talent in God. And I'm going to use the trumpet playing as an illustration, not playing the trumpet, but just telling you about my story. And the first one is this. My first obstacle was limitations. And you can write that in your notes, limitations. When I looked around at other trumpet players, names you will be familiar with, like Doc Severinsen. How many of you know who he is? Al Hurt, you remember him? Rafael Mendez, now some of you may not know, but some of you do. When I heard Rafael Mendez, I wanted to take my trumpet and just run over it. Because it's impeccable kind of trumpet player. And I could go on down the list of trumpet players. When I compare myself to them, I said, why bother? Why try? But you know what I found out? How many of you could take a trumpet this morning and play something that we'd recognize? How many of you in here could? Well, you know what that means? I'm a better trumpet player than all of y'all. I could be lousy, but bottom line is, I can play better than you. But when I compare myself to you, I'm doing really, really good. When I compare myself to some real trumpet players. I remember one time I was asked to speak at Liberty Church in Pensacola, and I was also asked to bring my trumpet along and play. And we're singing the world right before time for me to play. The guy who was going to accompany me on the piano, he said, "You see those two guys out there?" He said, "They mix sound for Phil Driscoll." So I did the only noble thing to do. I went over to the guys. They were sitting right here on the front pew. I went over to the guys and I said, "Guys, would y'all do me a favor?" I said, "I'm going to be playing trumpet in a few minutes. Would y'all just go ahead and leave now?" Because I knew they were used to hearing Phil. Now, there were people like Brother Ken, after I played that day, he got up to speak and he said, "I think Marc's better than Phil Driscoll." And I can only tell you what that says about Brother Ken's musical taste. He didn't know, because Phil's a phenomenal trumpet player who developed his gift fully and used it. But, it was a little intimidating to play the trumpet for guys that I knew were mixing sound for Phil. They were very gracious, and I appreciated that. But we become quickly aware of our limitations with the gifting that God gave us. And if we're not careful, we'll let our limitations shut us down. We'll say, "Well, since I can't be the very best, I'm not going to do it." But what you have, the giftings God has put within you, can bless somebody. The most public playing I've done lately, and this is not lately, in the past decade or so, when Jan's mother and stepfather were in assisted living at Stewart House, I would go there by invitation and speak, and I took my trumpet along. And, most folks in assisted living are very gracious. And so I'd play a few songs, and they just were very receptive to that. So, that was something that was kind of easy to do, because I was probably the only trumpet player they'd heard in a while. But if I compared myself to the others, I might just get discouraged and say, "I'm just not going to try to do it at all." Are your limitations keeping you from developing that thing that God put within you? Look at all the people in the Word. When God spoke to Gideon, you know what he said? He said, "I'm the least in my family." His limitations almost kept him from obeying God. When God spoke to Saul, not Saul in the New Testament, but Saul who became king, he said, "My clan is the least of all the clans in the tribe of Benjamin." He said, I'm from the least one. He saw his limitations. Moses, you remember when God called Moses? Moses said, "God, get somebody else. I'm slow of speech and tongue." God got a little frustrated with him because he didn't want to use his limited gift. God even eventually said, "Okay, your brother Aaron, he can be a spokesman." But the fact of the matter was, God wanted to use Moses. Eliab, who was David's oldest brother, David shows up on the battlefield. Father sent him to check on the brothers. Goliath comes out and makes this charge to the armies of Israel. And David begins to ask questions. And the older brother does the older brother thing. How many older brothers do we have in here? How many of you had an older brother? Okay, a lot more had one than were one. Older brothers have this thing. They kind of pick at you and they like to remind you they're the older brother, And they want to be stronger, they want to be faster and all these things. So Eliab, when David begins to ask questions, "Well, what will be done for the man that stands up to Goliath?" He says something like this to him. "Where are those few sheep you left in the wilderness? In other words, you're just a sheep boy. You're just a sheepdog. And you're going to be talking about somebody fighting Goliath?" His limitations were thrown out by his big brother. And Amos, the prophet, said, "I wasn't a prophet. I wasn't the son of a prophet. I was just a sheep herder." And yet, each one of these people who had so great limitations, God used them in a mighty way for His glory. Let's read the scripture together. 2 Corinthians 10. It says, "For we dare not class ourselves or compare ourselves with those who commend themselves." Would you say that part with me, please? It's on the screen. "For we dare not class ourselves or compare ourselves with those who commend themselves." About anybody and about any giftings God has put within us. And it goes on to say, "But they, measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves," what? Say it again. "Are not wise." When you begin to compare your gifts to anybody else, it's not wise. Because you can always find somebody that their gifting similar to yours, maybe you see as stronger, better, more effective or anything else, and it might make you want to table yours or hide it in the closet. But you have to understand there are many, as we'll see, let's read on here. It says, "We, however, will not boast beyond measure, but with the limits of the sphere which God appointed us." So whatever your giftings are, you don't have to be the best. You don't have to be the biggest. You don't have to be the most famous. You just have to be somebody that's willing to use your little gift and let God use it in a big way. So whatever it is, don't let your limitations hold you back in it. Use it where you can. If it's the nursing home, if it's your neighbors, if it's somebody that just really thinks you're the most gifted person in the world, use it to bless them and develop it, whatever it is. So don't let your limitations hold you back. The second thing is something that has been a big deal with me. Put down in your notes, time. It takes time to develop your gift. I say it all the time. I love myself, I just love to play the horn and make sounds with it and play along with music. I've been doing it basically all my life since I first got a trumpet. I'd put on a record of Al Hurd or Doc Severinsen and try to play along with what they were playing, had a good time. My daddy he always used to say he couldn't play anything, had a hard time playing the radio. But he used to listen to me and he'd say, "That's good, son." Or he'd say, "Well, you really missed that here," or something like that. I'd get so irritated sometimes, but I realized he was really one of my bigger fans. And so what I wound up doing was I developed that gift over and over time. And here's what the word says. It says, "Sing to him a new song, play how." If we can bring that up on the screen there, play how. How do you play skillfully? You got to practice over and over and over. You got to develop a skill. If you want to be a good artist, you got to practice painting or drawing. I remember when we had the Showtime series, and I encouraged everybody that had some kind of a talent for art or poetry or whatever else to bring it. And we displayed it on the pews. After the service, we put them all on the pews and people could go by and see. And Ben, I remember seeing your ink drawing. I think it was of a duck. And it was just, Ben's a tremendous, he's a great singer. I love when Ben sings. He's also a tremendous artist. It looked very, very good. He just did kind of an ink drawing of a duck. And I remember that. Obviously, he had some skill in that area. You have some skills that if you developed them and put some time into them, you could make an impression on people with that skill. But it takes what? T-I-M-E, which spells what? Time. You got to spend some time on that to use it for the glory of God. Malcolm Gladwell, who's a New York Times writer and bestseller writer, talks about the 10,000-hour rule. And he said when you do something for 10,000 hours, then you develop a certain amount of expertise. And I can think back, I probably did at one time play trumpet for 10,000 hours total between band practice and just playing at home and all those things, and got fairly proficient in it. Not enough to make Phil Driscoll or Al Hurd or Doc Severinsen nervous, but enough to use it as a gift. And so, what are you doing for 10,000 hours? What are you doing to develop that gifting within you? If you give some time, maybe you say, I can't give 10,000. Can you give a few hours to developing that? If you really believe that God has gifted you in that area, can you do something to develop it and use it for the glory of God? And so the word says, whatever you do, if it's playing, for instance, play how? Skillfully. Play skillfully, and when you do, it means you got to practice and practice and practice in order to do it. So at times my limitations held me back. At times my time factor these days holds me back, because it seems like by the time you get to the end of the day, that's just one more thing that maybe you can't put your time into. So obstacles, limitations. Everybody say limitations. And time. Third one, and by the way, let me put this for your notes too. How many of you have heard the phrase, practice makes perfect? You heard that? Actually, somebody said, really, it's perfect practice makes perfect. Say that with me. Perfect practice makes perfect. Now, I wasn't going to try to do this again, but I was going to give you a little illustration. Perfect practice is not playing pretty songs. Perfect practice is praying stuff that most of you wouldn't say, oh, play it again. It's little exercises like, and you do that kind of thing over and over. Nobody's just sitting around begging, saying, oh, let me hear that. Again, it's just an exercise, a musicianship, but it's what makes for better playing. Lip slurs are good, like, you're not using your tongue, you're just slurring the notes. If I did that a whole lot, I'd be back playing again, because that's a real lip builder. So these kind of things, perfect practice makes perfect. How can you perfectly practice the thing that God has given you? Suppose your gift is the gift of encouragement. Then basically what you can do is right now look around and say, who needs some? Who needs some encouragement? And start with your house. You can work wonders encouraging your family, encouraging your kids. Some of you have heard me tell the story before. My mama, when I came home from my first accordion lesson or two, I said, Mama, listen to this. And I could plunk out, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Do, 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 do. And I played that for Mama. Mama grabbed me up, grabbed my accordion up. We jumped in the car. She took me about 4 blocks down the road to Grandma's house. Took me and my accordion in the house and said, play it for her, son. You'd have thought I was ready for Carnegie Hall. And I played for Grandma. I had all kinds of encouragement just for Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star on little red accordion. Mom was a great encourager. Dad was a great encourager in my life for those sort of things. When I picked up trumpet in the 7th grade, as a 7th grader, I could play by ear. I'd play along with different things. And I remember Bobby Hackett, I think was his name. It was a record. Y'all remember records? 33 and a half, whatever, this big around. It was a record, and I could set it right for that song and play Wonderland by Night. And maybe remember that song. Do, 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 do. And so I'd play that. Mama just thought that was so beautiful. So one day, 7th grade, she asked the senior high band director, who was also the 7th grade director of the early band, because he wanted to get all the kids off to a good start. His name was Rip Reagan. He's in Gadsden, Alabama. He's a well-known band director in that area and other parts of the country. So he was my 7th grade band director, but she said, son, I want you to play that for Mr. Reagan. Mama. And she said, I want you to play it for him. So I played Wonderland by night, by ear, for Mr. Reagan. And he was inspired enough by it. He actually invited me as a 7th grader to come up and play a solo with the senior high band for one of their concerts. Now, my nerves got the better of me, and I didn't actually make that concert. But I went for practice and everything else and played what y'all would know as Danny Boy. It's actually Londonderry Air. But the bigger point in all that was my mama promoted her appreciation for my gifting. She encouraged them. You can do that in your family. You got a kid that has a musical talent. You got a wife that has a cooking talent. Brag on her. Make her feel good. You got a husband that has a hard-working talent. Just simply brings home the bacon. That's a gift. To be able to work hard and to be able to do what he needs to do. Be an encourager of those particular kinds of gifts, because you may be helping them overcome. Did I give you the third one? Fear. Fear. Because fear will keep you from a lot of things. And this was my fear when I was kind of in the peak of my trumpet playing times and years. You know what my big fear was? That I might miss a note. That I might miss one note. And if I missed that one note, I'd go away grieving. Oh, I missed that note. Other people would say, oh man, that was great. And I'd be thinking to myself, but I missed a note. Now, everybody said that's ridiculous. It is, thank you. It really is, because if you play 1,000 notes right and you miss one, that's not too bad, right? Because the best of musicians will either miss a note or it'll be a little bit of wrong intonation or something like that. But to be able to play a whole bunch of notes right and to miss one every once in a while, that shouldn't hold us back from using our gifts. Suppose you burnt some cookies. Say, oh, I burnt cookies one time. I'm never going to cook them again. Jan has noticed our sons, when she'll bake cookies. I remember Jonathan and Jared used to team up together. And one of them would distract her while the other would go sneak a couple of cookies off the plate while they were still kind of warm. And they'd give one to the brother. One did the distracting, the other. And of course, Jan knew what they were doing. And she grinned at it because she liked the fact that her sons loved her cookies. But every once in a while, they'd get a little bit too done. She'd get distracted on something. Ask any of our guys if they're glad Mama didn't quit baking cookies just because she burnt some every once in a while. And she never did really burn them. I liked them crisp anyway. And so fear of missing a note, fear of messing up with your gift, fear of somebody seeing you do something that's less than perfect can keep you from using what God's gifted you to do. And so there are limitations that we can compare ourselves. There's the time factor, and there's just the fear factor. How many of you have some kind of gift that at least at times, be honest, because I'm admitting it myself, a little bit of fear, a little bit of stage fright, a little bit of not getting it done right has kept you from utilizing that gift. Hold them up real high for just a minute. Look around. Wow. Hold them up real high. Wave them for a minute because it's kind of dark out there. That's a majority of us in this room. That just because of fear, we let it hinder us. Whenever you read the story of the talents. Now, how many of you know in the Bible, when it talks about talents, it's not just talking about like a talent for music. It's talking about currency. Nevertheless, it applies in a lot of different areas in our life that God has given you a talent like we mean talents. But those who were given the talents, you remember the story, one was given so many. They took them out and made so many more. Another, and then it got down to the one that was only given one. And this is what he said when, in fact, that he didn't use that talent to gain anything. He said, I was afraid and went and hid your talent in the ground. What did he say? I was afraid and I did what? It's not good grammar, but I went and hid. I went and hid your talent in the ground. Your talent for us could be the talent you gave me, God. I hid it because of my fear. I let it go dormant. I didn't utilize it for your glory. I was afraid I might miss a note or burn a cookie or something else. And said, look, there you have what is yours. But it wasn't enough, was it? Because fear hindered from being able to develop and to utilize that gift. I want to finish this with one more scripture. And I want you to look at it carefully because it really says what this whole thing we've been talking about this morning says. Let's read it together, and if we can bring it up on the screen as well. Let's read this out loud together. God has given each of you some special abilities. Be sure to use them to help each other, passing on to others God's many kinds of blessings. So look at that. Let's break it down for a minute. God has given who? Each of you. How many eaches do we have in here? Now, some of you may be sitting here saying, I don't think I have a talent for anything. I'm just not very gifted. I guarantee you that's a lie the enemy's told you. You might not have discovered your talent, or you might not think much of your talent. You know, all I can do is just write nice little notes. Well, your nice little notes can change a life. There are certain people, anytime I see a note from them, I say, this is going to be good. Because first of all, they use their notes to bless and encourage. And second of all, they're good at it. They're good at writing notes of encouragement or speaking words of encouragement. So if it's that, don't minimize your gift because you can use it and be a real blessing in it. And so God has given each of you some special abilities. Now what's the next thing say? Be sure to use them. Let's just stop at that for a minute. Let's say that. Be sure to use them. Let's say it again. Be sure to use them. What does it say? What are you supposed to do with your gift? Be sure to use it. Are you? Are you doing so? Are you making use of that gift? Are you developing it to use it the best you can? You ain't got to be the best in the world. You just got to be the best that you can do. The ability that God has given you. God has given each of you some special abilities. Be sure to use them to help each other. Why? Passing on to others. Let's say that. Passing on to others. What do? You pass it on to other people. That's the reason for our gifts. It's not to impress people. It's not so they'll say, oh, wow, you're good. It's so people will be blessed by what you can do, the gift that God has given you. And when you take it and you don't let your limitations hold you back, you apply your time to developing it. And as a result, you don't let fear hold you back. You can utilize that gift. How many of you know we have sitting right here among us a bagpipe player? You know that? You ever heard him play bagpipes? That's Bob over here. And I love bagpipes, and I especially like Amazing Grace on the bagpipes. If you outlive me, you probably need to come play that at the cemetery. But I just love to hear bagpipes playing Amazing Grace at cemeteries. I just think it's, well, I won't belabor the point, but we got a bagpipe player. And how many of you can play a bagpipe? I wouldn't even know how to hold one. But I'm glad we got a bagpipe player. How many of you been blessed when Bob's played bagpipes? He can't see you, so just give him a hand, okay? And you might not be a bagpipe player. You might not be a trumpet player. You may not be a cookie baker. But if you don't know what your gift is, today's invitation is to challenge you. Figure it out. Pray over it. And by all means, use it for the glory of God. Passing on to others God's many kinds of blessings. Don't compare your kind to somebody else. God has many kinds of blessings. You either know what it is, develop it, or you don't, find it. Figure out what it is. Because when everybody in here goes to batting 1,000 on utilizing the gifts that God has given, tremendous things can happen. Not just among us, but throughout the community.